From Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and the studios of 850 AM WFTL, this is Outlaw, America's alternative voice. Streaming around the world at outlawshow.com. This week, Out and Legal. Our guests include Circuit Court Judges Susan Greenhawt, Robert Lee, and Lisa Porter. Here's your host for Outlaw, attorney, Politico, and equal rights activist, Dean Trantalis.
Good evening. My name is Dean Trantalis, and welcome to Outlaw, America's Alternative Voice. Tonight, our program is sponsored by the law firm of Kapelowitz, Ostrow, Ferguson, Weisselberg, and Keachel. Our guests are three very distinguished members of the Judiciary here in Broward County. We have County Court Judge Robert Lee and Judge Lisa Porter and Judge Susan Greenhawt. Welcome.
Welcome. Thank you.
Thank you for coming. And we'll begin our show right after this message.
This is Outlaw, America's alternative voice, with your host, Dean Trantalis.
Welcome back. This is our seventh show tonight as we continue the journey into an historic approach to educate, challenge, and to provoke listeners into hearing and understanding issues that directly affect members of the gay community, as well as their families, their friends, and co-workers. This is the first time a South Florida radio program will feature matters that exclusively focus on the gay community. And each week we will be presenting guests who will speak to us about a topic most likely you've heard about in the news. We will explore, we will entertain hopes, we will invite you, the listener, to call in and participate. Our phone number here at the station is 877-850-8585. That's 877-850-8585. The gay community is often referred to as the lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgendered community, LGBT for short. Each day its members are challenged by discrimination and the consequences of bigotry that are often left unchecked by rules which govern our society. Outlaw will serve as a new voice, an alternative voice to the messages heard most often in the mainstream media. It will act as an outlet for those whose voices cannot otherwise be heard, and through this dialogue, it will hopefully uncover new ways to put an end to injustice and inequality. Tonight, our guests are three distinguished members of the Broward Judiciary, and I must say they're equally my friends, and thank you for coming tonight. You have to be my friend to be able to come here Sunday night when everyone has to be at work tomorrow early, but I appreciate it, and thank you very much for all coming.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Each of you, I'm sure, has a journey or a path that has taken you to where you are today. You all seem to come from very different backgrounds, and I thought maybe I would start with you, Judge Greenhawt. Tell us a little bit about what brought you to the position of judge, to the judiciary. You started out as an attorney, and what made you want to come to this level of your career?
Well, I thought I was having a career change. I had been a registered nurse before I went to law school, and so I thought by going to law school I would be doing something completely different. But after I became a family lawyer and now a family court judge, I realized I still have the same job as when I was an emergency room nurse. People come to me, they tell me their problems, and they seek my intervention to make the solution. So I think as much as I thought that I was embarking on a new career, I guess in my lifetime it's my karma to be in the helping profession.
Tell us a little bit about what family law means. What types of cases, what types of challenges do you find yourself confronting in your courtroom from day to day?
Well, I'm the administrative judge of the Unified Family Court. That consists of domestic violence, delinquency, dependency, and domestic relations. So my division, I have a domestic relations division, which is divorce, paternity, adoption, and I have a small dependency division, which
dependency meaning alcohol and drug dependency?
Or it means the abused, abandoned, and neglected children that have been that frequently are no longer with their families, and That's a small part of my job. My main division is in the divorce, adoption, and paternity area.
So you obviously hear quite a few heart-rendering moments and situations in people's lives. It's probably difficult to end your day and feel like humanity has. Well, actually, let me ask you that question. How does it feel to end your day? And what is your sense of humanity after you've heard so many cases of children either being abused or neglected, families who are involved in domestic violence? How does it now feel coming from being a family attorney to being the family judge?
I think that you need to be able to see it in perspective and realize that it's a part of life that exists, whether or not you help the people and do those cases or not. It's not a matter of if I didn't do this type of work wouldn't exist. So for me, it really, with my background of working at Jackson Memorial, for those of you from South Florida, emergency room, it really is very, very much the same demographic and the same type of problems. People at a very low point in their life seeking assistance to try to better their situation.
You find yourself being more a handholder than a jurist?
Well, you certainly need to know the law, and you certainly need to be able to apply the law to the situation, but there's certainly a large component of I don't know if you want to call it hand-holding, but certainly it requires more compassion and more understanding of human frailty, human condition, human problems than possibly a civil division, or a division with more business type orientation and less human orientation.
The human component. Let me ask you a sexist question. Do you feel that being a woman gives you a little more sensitivity to address situations and knowing how to resolve situations like this?
I would have to say absolutely not. We have maybe a 50-50 division of males and females, and some of the male judges are more, if you would say, compassionate or more sensitive than some of the female judges.
I see. Judge Porter, welcome.
Thank you.
Your division just changed. You used to be in what area of the law before you now change into your current division?
My prior assignment was in the dependency division.
Also in the dependency
for
division?
For 3 years,
which
which was very different from my practice as a lawyer.
Well, tell us a little bit about your practice.
Well, before I became a judge, I was a prosecutor for 20 years. I worked first in the 5th Judicial Circuit, which is in the northern part of Florida, as an assistant state attorney, handled pretty much every type of criminal case you can imagine up there. Then moved back to South Florida and got a job with the Office of Statewide Prosecution, which is part of the Attorney General's office, and developed expertise in investigating and prosecuting complex, multi-circuit, mostly white-collar crime. So mostly economic crimes, some violent crime, but the majority was white-collar. My first assignment when I became a judge was in the dependency division, so I've...
much like the cases Judge Greenhawt has talked about?
Exactly. And then in January of this year, I was moved to the circuit criminal division, so I've been in the criminal division now for almost a year.
Do you find there to be similarities between the two types of divisions? Is there, or do you feel that you draw more upon your experience as a prosecutor in trying to draw your experience and your talent in the division you now work in?
I mean, certainly that my background is in criminal, so I have a comfort level there. I'm chair of the criminal law section for the Florida Bar this year, and have been a member of the executive council for, I think, 4 or 5 years now. So I'm happy to come back.
So you get around.
I'm happy to come back to criminal. But the best example I can give to people about the difference between the two divisions is that in criminal court, a case comes to you and you see a tiny part of a chapter in someone's life.
Right.
And in dependency court, you see pretty much their entire life in every chapter in their life from the time they were born until the time that they come into dependency court for some reason.
Well, explain to us what that means to those who aren't really all that familiar with what you're saying.
Yeah, well, in dependency court, the parents come in, oftentimes children, there's an allegation of abuse, abandonment, or neglect, and children are removed from the home.
Mm-hmm.
And as part of that removal process, the Department of Children and Families, they do a complete investigation into the backgrounds of the parents and the immediate family and into the history of the children. And you get a complete report on the parents and the children, and you understand pretty much what has happened in the family, what happened with the father, with the mother, when they were growing up to the point in time when they had children, then what happened that led to the removal of the children.
So all of this is supposed to be drawn together and give you a background, and you're supposed to draw conclusions as to how you want to dispose of an individual case based on all these backgrounds. Is that kind of how it works?
Well, what you try to sort through is decide what to do that's in the best interest of the children in terms of placement issues, in terms of services that need to be put in place for the mother, for the father, for the children. And unless there's egregious abuse, and the initial goal of the case is to terminate parental rights,
Mm-hmm.
which sometimes it is in a case of egregious abuse, the majority of the time the goal in any removal case is reunification of the children with the parents.
I see.
So you're just trying to fashion a solution for the family to reunify.
And you say that differs from the way in which you address cases in the criminal court. You say in the criminal court is more of a snapshot rather than
right. It's an event.
It's an event.
Usually a single event or a few events that are bringing someone into court. They committed a burglary.
In terms of sentencing, though, don't you also take into consideration background, circumstances, influences, history?
Right. At sentencing, the state will bring in witnesses sometimes for the victim,
Mm-hmm.
family of the victim. The defendant will bring in witnesses, family, present testimony to factor in. But in criminal court, in circuit criminal court, we have sentencing guidelines, and oftentimes judges' hands are tied in terms of what sentence they can impose, because
Right.
the guidelines dictate what sentence has to be imposed. Say, for instance, if there's a minimum mandatory sentence because of a firearm or a quantity of drugs, if the state's not willing to waive the minimum mandatory, you can't give less than the minimum mandatory. So.
But other than that, in non-drug related cases, you do delve into the background of a particular defendant, do you not, in trying to determine sentencing?
Well, really, for the most part, sentences are negotiated between the defense and the state, and they're presented to the court. Very, very seldom do I reject a negotiated sentence. So you're basically just ratifying what's already been negotiated, and there's usually not a lot of testimony because they've reached a negotiated settlement.
I see.
So.
Well, so that's what goes on the circuit side of things. So,
Right.
Judge Lee, our county court representative, tell us a little bit about what is the county court and how does that differ from the circuit court?
Well, our county court in Florida is the court that most people actually get experience with if you're going to go to the court system. We handle criminal disputes where the possibility of jail is less than a year, civil disputes where the amount in dispute is less than $15,000. And that means we handle all evictions, all traffic citations, all DUIs.
And all the juicy stuff in small claims,
all
right?
the small claims, all the Judge Judy type cases that come into court.
That's really the most entertaining part of the law.
Right. So, that's where most people's experience will be, is in the county bench. Although in our particular circuit in Broward, our chief judges have historically requested and asked the county judges to participate across the board and help out. And so many of us, including myself and some of my colleagues, do assist, and I've crossed over and helped in family on occasion, domestic violence on occasion, felonies on occasion, and but our primary focus is the county level.
And how long have you been on the bench?
I'm in my 15th year, believe it or not.
15 years.
I know, it's surprising because if you recall, I met you probably just about 20 years ago, and
please don't bring that up.
And that was
we'll cut to a commercial.
No, but that was actually an experience of getting involved in some civil rights litigation in Florida that you spearheaded, and you got me involved. I had not been involved in any of that up to that point in my practice. I was a commercial litigator. And it really set me on my path to moving forward. And that actually led, within 4 years after that experience, the governor appointed me to the bench. So that was what really triggered that journey for me to become a member of the Judiciary.
That's great. It's great to hear that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think really in keeping with the theme of the show tonight, you happen to be the first openly gay member of our Broward County Judiciary. Is that not correct?
That's correct.
Yeah, and Judge, was it Governor Childs?
Governor Childs appointed me.
Appointed you.
Right.
And I remember at that time it was kind of touch and go, because while it was known that you were a gay man, it wasn't like we were broadcasting it. I think Lawton Childs knew it. I think that he was advised as to it, and yet you presented credentials that were clearly superior to the others who were nominated by the Judicial Nominating Committee, and you were appointed. And not only did the people who live in Broward County benefit from your appointment, but I think it was a landmark opportunity for the gay community to once again establish another role model, which you presented to the community as being our first judge, and that was 15 years ago.
15 years ago. Yes. Thank you for those comments.
And so you broke that glass ceiling. You like many of those in the community who've been firsts in our community, I think it opened the door to a lot of situations, and I would like to think that it made it more acceptable for future jurists, such as Judge Greenhawt and such as Judge Porter, to be able to participate on the bench. And now you tell me, and I'll open this question to all of you: did it make a difference? Does it matter whether you were an openly LGBT community member, or did it not, in the appointment of your position, Judge Greenhawt?
Well, I think it's hard to know what really goes into an appointment for any of the judges. It's a very speculated about process. I was appointed in 2003 by Governor Bush. So it's very hard for me to know what did Governor Bush know, what didn't he know, who discussed what.
Were you in a relationship at that time?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And it was never a secret on my side, but nobody ever asked me about it either as part of the nomination process. So if I were going to guess, I would say it was well known to the governor, but I have no... he never told me, nor did he ever bring it up.
Did you speak with him? Did you interview with him?
He didn't. Governor Bush didn't do his own interviews. He had a team that interviewed on his behalf.
And the question never came up?
The question never came up. So I don't really, although I will say, I don't suggest that you should try to go on the bench if you're trying to keep that part of your life a secret.
Or do anything in public.
Right, unless you've been extremely successful in keeping it a secret from everybody, because the first time you go out in public with your partner, or the first time people know this is just one more way that people, when they're not happy with your decision, try to move negatively against you. And so I don't think it's a good idea to go on the bench.
Are there any people on the bench who are keeping it a secret?
I don't know. They haven't. No one has told me.
You're going to hear it here tonight, ladies and gentlemen.
But if it's a secret, I guess they're not telling.
Okay. Judge Porter, do you think that your sexual orientation had any effect on how you were chosen to be a member of the Judiciary?
I don't know that it had any effect. I was appointed in April of 2008 by Governor Christ. And prior to becoming governor, he was the Attorney General for 4 years. So while I was at the Office of Statewide Prosecution, he was the second Attorney General that I worked under. I worked under Attorney General Bob Butterworth before I worked for...
Is this part of the statewide prosecutor
Yes.
position? Okay. And
Yeah,
that's how you
but-
became familiar with who they were?
Right.
Okay.
And, while I didn't see Governor Christ every day or every week, I'd see him when he was in the office maybe once or twice a year. He knew who I was. I didn't routinely talk with him about personal issues or matters. And, of course, never discussed my personal life or anything like that.
I'm sure he didn't discuss his either.
Right. It was not discussed in my local nominating committee interview, but
That was in the Fifth Circuit.
well, no, down here.
Down here, okay.
Here, when I interviewed down here in 2008. But I know that members of the commission knew that I was gay, and it was brought up. And
Oh, it was brought up.
basically, it wasn't brought up
Oh,
in my
wasn't.
interview, but I heard it was discussed by some of them, and it was basically a non-issue at the local level. When I went up for my interview with the Governor's General Counsel, it was never brought up. Then I had an interview with Governor Christ in his office. It was never brought up, and then I was appointed. So, yeah, I'd like to think that. I mean, look, if you're heterosexual, it's not an interview point, of whether you should get something or not get something, and it should be the same whether you're gay or what your orientation is. So.
Well, I'd like to agree with you, and I think many of us who live and work in a progressive community would like to think that that's the case. But do you ever feel, based on people that you know who have applied to be judge, who may have been openly gay, do you feel that any of their opportunities had been discounted because of their sexual orientation? And do you feel that it may have worked against them in their attempt to achieve that that level in the judiciary, being either a county court judge or a circuit court judge? Robert Lee, do you have something to say?
What I would say about that, the commission structure for nominating judges in Florida is uniform throughout the state. There's commissions all over, and I know, regardless of the composition of the commissions, I know in South Florida we tend to have commissions that don't seem to care that much about that issue, but that's not necessarily true in other parts of the state. So if the individuals on those commissions, who are all appointed by the governor, by the way, have an anti-gay bent, then that commission's going to reflect that. And I have heard stories of people going, for instance, applying for somewhere near Daytona Beach and being given a really hard time
Because of their sexual
orientation. But I've heard that regardless of the political party in South Florida, for the commissions, it simply has become a non-issue.
Do you think, perhaps you may not know the answer, but are there other openly gay judges throughout the state of Florida?
I know, well, of course, Miami-Dade. I say, of course.
Right, so-
Of course,
but I'm saying-
Miami-Dade.
And I'm talking like, the middle part of the state, the upper part of the state.
I believe Fort Myers now has, Lee County now has its first openly gay judge.
But Daytona doesn't. Brevard
No,
County
I don't
doesn't.
know of anyone
North of the
actually outside of
Lake Okeechobee.
Outside of South Florida. I know no one other than Lee County. Which, when you talk about Orange and Osceola and Duval, some very large counties, it's somewhat surprising that that's not to say that there aren't any that are not out, because there may well be, but they face a much tougher, and it just goes to show you how diverse our state continues to be.
Right.
When things like that can really make a difference and as a matter of fact, when I was appointed 15 years ago, the governor's office remarked to me it was a much easier thing for the governor's office to appoint me out of Broward County than if I had been for the same position out of Duval County, which is Jacksonville.
Chances are your name probably wouldn't have even been submitted to the governor.
Probably.
Had it been from one of these other counties, is what you're saying. But in Broward County, you're talking about the culture, the attitude, and so forth. You're saying that it just seemed like it was a non-issue when you became.
Well, when I became it, I mean, because being the first, it was a little bit of. I mean, I made the headlines of the Miami Herald. It said, gay appointed judge. There for everybody, but it was very well known, and there was some scuttlebutt. And I did have a group of about 20 lawyers that sent me a letter that were very disturbed that I was on the bench, and they would pray for me, etc. And
there are always going to be those type, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. We're going to take a break right now, and when we come back in the second half of our show, I'd like to talk a little bit about the types of cases that come before you that have affected the LGBT community and how you've been able to address them. We'll be right back.
From Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and the studios of 850 WFTL, this is Outlaw, America's alternative voice, streaming around the world at outlawshow.com.